Hello everyone, welcome to Tea Time. I'm your host, Michelle Talamo, and today we have an exciting subject for you. If you own a home, if you are in jeopardy of foreclosure, if you're discussing buying a home, any of those topics are in your mindset right now, we have with us today Laura Walsh, and she is a consumer education specialist. And Laura is going to educate us on what's happening in the mortgage realm and why it's so important to every homeowner, not those who are just in jeopardy of foreclosure, but also those who are owning the home or looking to buy a home. So welcome, Laura. Thanks for coming in today.
Well, thank you for having me, Michelle.
Now, why, Laura, let's explain to the people, why is this topic important? What does it mean to them as a homeowner?
Well, thank you. It's a very good question. 66 million homeowners are affected by the bad acts that were committed by Wall Street from 1995 all the way through 2008. So 66 million homes have what's called clouded title. The liens that on their home may not be enforced. So that means that they don't have valid liens on their property, which has huge implications.
Well, I pay a mortgage to a entity.
Right.
They send me every month
Right.
without fail the money that's due, the invoice, and I pay that. What does that really mean to someone like me?
Well, you know, all these new players are in effect. It used to be in the old days, you had a mortgage loan with a bank, and that bank would extend credit, and they were listed as the lender on the mortgage. Well, after the mid-1990s, that all changed. And what happened is they brought in what's called originators. So really, the entity that you're that is listed as the lender may not be the lender. And the person you pay now could be listed as the lender on your mortgage, but most often they just bought a contract to service your mortgage and to accept those payments and to send out those notices. It does not mean they have any right to enforce the note, which is the debt on your property.
So Laura, let me ask this question. If I'm paying my mortgage, my monthly mortgage, I'm writing out a check to ABC Company. They send me the invoice. They're the servicer.
That's correct.
And they render those funds, or are supposed to render those funds, to XYZ Bank.
Exactly, or an entity would have a trust name, and sometimes the trust name is something like, you know, Wells Fargo as trustee for certificate holders of mortgage loan 2005-4. That's the name of the trust. So because most of these mortgages were allegedly, they were turned into securities, like certificates. You know, when you have if you have a own stock in a company, in a mutual fund, you would get certificates, right?
Correct.
Right. It's the same. They turned mortgages into stocks back in the early 90s. So really, the entity that you're paying every month, you hope and trust that your monies are being applied to that note in payment to that entity who's the person entitled to enforce the note. Okay, but we don't know because of all the malfeasance on Wall Street. Very few homeowners are confident anymore that their payments are being made to the correct entity.
But I was under the impression that, for instance, mortgages were registered for, say, Bergen County. They would register in Hackensack.
Right.
Now, is that still happening?
Well, the mortgages are, once you initially, again, you originate, right? So say you went to BCD Bank, and BCD Bank was your originator. It's listed as the lender on your mortgage, and that mortgage would be recorded in a short period of time, and if your home is in Bergen County, in the Bergen County land records. But it does not mean that BCD Bank actually loaned you the money. Those entities were called originators, and what we've learned since 2008 is those entities, they weren't banks, they were sales organizations. They got paid a fee for finding the homeowner, bringing them to the closing table, and then they would get a fee after the closing. So many of those entities went out of business, and so your mortgage that's recorded for BCD Company is ostensibly valid, but BCD is out of business. So now you're paying another entity as a servicer every month, but if BCD went out of business, who is the person entitled to enforce your note? Where did your mortgage loan go? Who purchased it? What rights do they have? That's all very important, because under the law that governs the notes, if we pay the wrong entity, then the homeowner is liable for all payments on that mortgage from day one, all the way through that schedule. So if it's a 30-year loan and you have not paid the entity that really is the real person entitled to enforce, then you have a commitment to from day one to that entity.
So
it's huge.
So under that scenario, I could, for instance, be paying my mortgage every
Yes,
month,
right.
all the time, and then I could find out 9 years down the road that somebody else is actually the note holder, and then I would be liable for that money for all the past years that
Exactly.
I already paid?
If the new entity popped up.
Wow.
And under the law, they would be entitled to those payments.
So what does a homeowner do? Someone who
well,
is a little concerned about who they're paying, what should they do in this instance?
Well, it's a great question. What we do is we educate consumers on what all the fraud in Wall Street really means to the homeowner, right? So we have rights, and those rights need to be exercised. And one of the rights is we have every right to know the name of the person entitled to enforce our note. So we send something called a qualified written request. It's a template. The homeowner just, addresses it to their current servicer and asks the servicer for a number of items and evidence, and also the identity of the person entitled to enforce their note. And that has to be answered by the servicer in 30 days. It's very strict. It's a federal law that was strengthened under Dodd-Frank. So that's one way they can get some information. The next thing every homeowner should do is go to the county land records and get a copy of their mortgage that's recorded and any other documents that are recorded on that mortgage for their property. And that would include a document called an assignment of mortgage, which is often created by the servicer when a homeowner asks for a modification, if they fall behind in their payments, if some snag occurs where it looks like they haven't paid and they have. The servicer will gin up paperwork to make it look like they have ownership of that note so that they can march into court and foreclose. So you need to get those documents as well. And then what I do is I teach homeowners what to look for. We looked at who signed them. Is there, there's certain criteria. A lot of these trusts were governed under New York property law, so it's New York trust law rather. It's very, very precise. So for instance, many homeowners for the first time learn that they have a trust. They've never heard of it before. They're paying ABC Bank every month. They have not a clue that they have this other entity, so they'll go to the land records. If they'd asked for a modification, oftentimes there's an assignment of mortgage recorded by the servicer, and it will assign their mortgage from the entity that no longer exists, right, the originator that's long gone, directly into a trust, and the trust name will be listed. Well, that's a violation of New York security law. You cannot record or assign a mortgage directly into a trust. There is a number of steps that are supposed to happen in between, and that brings us back to title. I know this is a lot of information, but does that make sense? So it's really all about title, regardless of the status of your payment history. It really comes down to who had ownership of your note, when was it purchased and sold, who had it next, where's the evidence that provides us with that chain. If there's a break in the chain of title, then you may have clouded title, which is what's happening to 66
That's
million.
concerning. I mean, it is a lot for a homeowner who is just looking at, well, I signed the paperwork, I agreed to pay X amount, I'm paying it so many years. I want to be able to get my hands on that note that says the loan has been satisfied at the end of the term. I want to be able to have that comfort. And now, with the information you're sharing, I don't know how many people can be comforted by that.
Well, exactly, because what's happened, many homeowners are writing these letters, and oftentimes they will be given the name of the person entitled to enforce, but other times they're told it's none of their business. It's a complete violation of the statutes and the law, and they're completely, making it very difficult to find out if as to your point, if you finish paying for your mortgage at the end of 30 years, then you need the original note back, marked stamp paid in full, and there should be a document filed in the county registry called a satisfaction of mortgage or discharge of mortgage. Well, the entity that holds the rights is the only one that can file that document. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So even though
sense.
you've paid the loan, if the document is not signed by the correct party, then the lien may not be extinguished.
Yeah, that's very concerning. You know,
So,
preparatory
does that
to
make
our
sense?
conversation tonight, I did find out that Senator Rice in New Jersey has put forth a bill. I do not know whether or not it's been voted on yet. I don't know where it is in the process, but he has put together a bill that would protect people who are actually going through foreclosure, that once a entity, and I'm going to use the word entity because
Right.
I'm not so sure who that would be, but once they foreclose on the home, that individual is held harmless from anyone else stepping up. So saying that they had rights to that home. So I think that's a great step in the
Yes.
right direction
Yes.
to protect New Jersey homeowners.
Absolutely.
My concern after our dialogue here is what about those who are paying their mortgages on time? What happens to them? Should they not be also as equally protected under the law that
Absolutely.
anyone who is collecting the money, you know, monthly,
Sure.
has the right to collect that money and is the bona fide, holder of that mortgage, or is the servicer of the bona fide group or entity that holds that mortgage? And if he were to include that,
Right.
I think that would protect all of the citizens of New Jersey. Now, how much money is actually lost out there?
We did a tally back in 2010, Michelle, looking at the boom period between 2004 and 2008, and because there's some discrepancy in states like Pennsylvania. They're required to file these assignments of mortgage. So every time a note in the mortgage note was sold, it was supposed to be recorded in the Pennsylvania registry. New Jersey has a may record statute, and we've been told that that doesn't mean they must record, and that's the problem. If you're trying to reestablish the chain of title in your property, it's almost impossible in the state of New Jersey because the land records were never filed that showed what the chain was.
But when I go to a closing, they've assessed me a fee for that. Did they not, for that registration?
Well, of the mortgage, but not for the assignments of mortgage, which should have been recorded every time the mortgage loan was sold.
So if I started off with one bank
That's right.
15 years ago, and during that time it's been handed off 3 times and I have different names,
Right.
I'm not quite sure if that's been handed over properly
That's
from
correct.
entity to entity.
That's correct. And they're supposed to send you send us a letter. Every time our mortgage loan servicing changes, you should get a hello and a goodbye letter. The goodbye from your current servicer who you're paying every month, right, that just collects the payments, and a hello letter from the new servicer. And you have 60 days in order to get those payments
Right.
to that new entity. They also are required under the law, every time the mortgage loan is sold, which is the lien and the note, right? They're supposed to travel together. We're supposed to be informed about that. Well, very few homeowners are sent those letters. We're not informed when the notes are sold. And so, for instance, there are a number of people who originated with companies like TopDot, which is now out of business. Well, TopDot didn't have any money. TopDot got the money from Lehman Brothers. Well, Lehman Brothers is no longer in business. And Lehman Brothers securitized or allegedly securitized the mortgage loan, packed them up in bundles, sliced and diced them, right? Sold off interest to many investors. Well, the trust no longer exists. After Lehman Brothers blew up, the Federal Reserve took over all of the trusts that were created by Lehman Brothers, and since has sold them off to vulture capital firms for pennies on the dollar. So you tell me how somebody who had TopDot, financed by Lehman Brothers, will have any knowledge today of who actually owns their mortgage loan and if they're paying the right person. They're not. They're not going to be able to do that based on the public records.
So my mind is traveling with this. So
Right.
if this is a concern,
Right.
people who have their money invested in 401ks, but have invested in the securities or the entities that are dealing in mortgages, it could be a house of cards for them.
Well, it is, and it's really pension funds, Michelle. The entity, there's a number of parties that were harmed. $13 trillion was stolen by the broker dealers who originated these mortgage loans back in, started in 1995. The height of it was 2004. From 2004 to 2008, they inflated the values of the homes. So I work with a lot of homeowners down in Essex County, and in Irvington, homeowners are getting slammed because between 2004 and 2008, they purchased a home or they refinanced a home. I've seen mortgages for $400,000 on an Irvington home. Well, those homes may have been lovely, but they were never worth $400,000. Today, the value is $50,000 and $60,000.
Oh my!
Yeah. So the homeowners, a number of them are paying. They're paying extraordinarily high payments every month because they don't want to be foreclosed. It's a family home. It's the first.
They're prisoners.
Yeah, and so they know how horrible foreclosure is in New Jersey. So they're spending all this money on an entity, and then it's not even getting to the right entity. So you know what I'm saying? So it's diabolical what has occurred, and really everybody is at risk who originated a mortgage or refinanced from 1995 through 2008. The values of the homes were inflated. So even though you signed a contract, would anybody sign a mortgage contract if they were told that their property value was inflated? That instead of being worth $400,000, their home was really worth $175,000? Would anybody in their right mind assume debt of $400,000 on a $175,000 property?
And people were given promises, you can sign off on this high amount of money because if you sign off on this mortgage for X amount of money, it's going to be worth $100,000 more the way the market is going and the way the boom is going. So they locked into that, but now they've seen it plummet from what I'm gathering from what you're saying.
Exactly. So if a home, what has changed, Michelle? In Irvington, they're the same homes, they're the same people. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is that now we know that the malfeasance occurred, that those loans were they were not good loans. They weren't solidly underwritten. It's not the homeowner's fault, but their homes were never worth $400,000. So what we say, we use this evidence not to, and we help dig through the records, and figure out exactly what happened.
Well, I know you do the seminars.
We do.
So you do free seminars.
That's correct.
You're not making money off of this.
No,
You're
it's all
doing
volunteer.
this as a commitment to people to help your neighbors and your fellow New Jerseyans. So what do you cover at these seminars?
Well, we look at the mortgage-backed security fraud, which is really, again, to your point, the investors were the pension funds, towns in Norway, China, Russia, that came in and bought those mortgage-backed securities and invested in those, So that's really where the money came to originate the mortgages, came from those investors, okay? So those investors were harmed because they didn't get the mortgages and the mortgage-backed securities. We found that in 2008. Okay? So it doesn't matter if somebody paid or not. It doesn't matter if they had a good credit score or not. Their mortgage never made it into the mortgage-backed security. So that's why those mortgages do not have valid liens, because they never made it in. So the investors can't sue for foreclosure because they don't have a valid lien. Okay, so those entities that exist today, the servicers are just grabbing the mortgages. And they're following through on foreclosures, and we're not confident that the person entitled to enforce the note with the investors are stuck, the pension funds are in horrible shape because there's no mortgages in the mortgage-backed securities.
So is this why a lot of people who look at the homes they have are not worth the money that it was on the open market and they were led to believe?
It's fraud.
So they can't sell the house. And is that why they're walking away?
Many are because they're so discouraged. And we think, it's my personal opinion, that the business model that banks and servicers have for modifications is meant to wear somebody down psychologically. So they just hand in the keys. Fax in these documents. Oh, we're missing it. Oh, you missed the timeline. Oh, you make too much money. You don't make enough money. Anything they can do to stall in order to make your life incredibly difficult, they will do, because they're in the business to make money. And they make money getting homeowners to leave their property. So they don't have they don't have the fees for the attorneys. They can simply go in and grab the deed, they can wash the title through. They don't have to worry about being sued because the homeowner's gone and has given up their property rights, right? So many people do leave. So we encourage in the seminar, we try to educate people on the fraud. And I know it's kind of esoteric right now when we're talking, but when we do it in the seminars, we have visuals and we break it down into bites. People understand it. I have, I have people who have never been in finance or law, who are plumbers, electricians, teachers, home health aides. They get it. They walk out of the seminar, they totally understand what happened. So we look at that piece. We also look and say, okay, there's certain federal laws that you have to exercise your rights. Use them or you lose them. And that's the qualified written request letter. A fair debt, because the servicer is a debt collector. So they're sending a bill every month. You have every right to know who you're paying. Who are they collecting that bill for, right? Who's that entity? So what we do is we give them a template. They send out the fair debt letter. They get a response, and we compare the documents. We ask for a copy of the original note, which again is the promise to pay. Well, many times, Michelle, the notes are completely different. Many times the notes are not endorsed as required under the terms of the pool servicing agreement for these trusts. So that's how we know the mortgage has never made it in, because there's no evidence that they made it into the trust.
What's the success rate on getting the servicer to respond to the homeowner?
Well, many, because of the new Dodd-Frank law, they do respond most often. They may not give a full response, but they do respond because it's under federal law. And if the homeowner does not get a response within 30 days, they can march into court and they can have an attorney file suit, and it's statutory, meaning either the entity responded or they didn't. If they didn't respond, then they win.
Okay.
So
that part's simple.
That part's really simple. The other piece is we look for specific things they've done wrong in the deal. And I can look through the documents, and we verify everything. So we look to see, was the trust registered? The trust is a corporate entity, and it's a unique corporate person. And so any corporate entity is required under again, not legal advice, but just, common sense. You read the statutes. New Jersey requires all corporations, LLCs, anybody conducting business to be registered with the Secretary of State of New Jersey. Well, Michelle, I've yet to see one trust that is registered in New Jersey. I've yet to see one trust that is registered in Delaware, which is its home state. If it is, or the other 48 states in the union, I check, go through everything. And we do not find it. We get certificates of non-existence from Delaware, New York, New Jersey, and that's a homeowner can take that and say, well, the entity you claim owns my note doesn't exist because they're not registered. If a corporation's not registered, it can't sue anybody in New Jersey or anywhere else. They must be registered. So people are walking away from their homes when this long trust name is supposedly entitled to enforce their note, and 9 times out of 10, that trust has never been registered and does not exist.
So these people have left their home under false pretenses,
right.
Really?
Right. And we think they should just go back and take their homes. If nobody else has moved into it, if it's abandoned, they should just mow the lawn, open up the door, and move back in, because the entity doesn't exist.
So if people want to get in touch with you, can we have them go to our PR person on our website?
Sure.
And ask for your contact information?
Absolutely, Michelle.
Well, that'll be great.
Yeah,
okay, so
you.
We'll help out people, anybody who's watching, anybody who's interested, we'll help them out by passing along their information to you, and then you could reach out. And then perhaps if you have a seminar coming up, we can also post it on our website.
That would be
and
ideal.
that will help them, because
Absolutely.
In Bergen County, do you anticipate doing some of those?
I'm working through a lot of the churches, so I am hoping that one of the churches in Hackensack will host us.
Oh, that'll be a great
which would be
location.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, very central.
Exactly.
Now, how did you get into this, Laura?
I used to be, I worked in media for 35 years, and I was at one point a reporter. So when the economy crashed in 2008, and they came out and said, oh, there was bad paper, and people didn't pay their mortgages, that's why everything collapsed, because I knew that wasn't true. So I started researching, and I followed the big money, and the guys who ran the big pension funds, and logged onto their conferences. I read their white papers in 2008 and 2009, and they were saying there are no mortgages in the mortgage-backed securities. It's a black swan. When people find out, there's going to be blood in the streets, because the pensions were defrauded. Homeowners are stuck with a huge debt for their largest, their largest asset is not worth nearly what they think it is. And so that's when I started the digging. And everything I'm telling you is in the public record. It's in congressional record, court cases. For example, a number of entities like Prudential filed a lawsuit against Goldman Sachs about a year and a half ago in Newark. And in the allegations, they had done an analysis and they looked at the trust that their loans were supposedly in, and that they found that out of all of the trusts, only 58% were never in the trust. And of the remaining 42%, 60% weren't done lawfully. And that's Prudential. So this is not, an urban myth. This is all based on records. And a lot of the entities that manage the pension funds have been suing in the Southern District of New York since 2008. They've marched into the court and they get huge settlements. And the Department of Justice, Bank of America, Citibank, all of them, right? They're getting huge settlements and the homeowner is left with nothing. The homeowner is getting no relief, and we're trying to change that.
This is certainly very disappointing, and I'm sure of interest to people who are watching this.
Well, I hope so, because people feel a moral obligation. We're not saying anybody should get a free house. What we're saying is people deserve a principal reduction, forgiveness of arrears, and lower interest rates so they can secure their private residence and secure their family's wealth. It's not about getting a free house. It's about paying for the right price, right? I mean,
And yeah, certainly.
what it's valued at.
Yes,
Right?
we want everything to be truthful, and we don't want
Right.
anything to be cloaked. We want transparency.
Exactly.
And the homeowner is certainly entitled to have the home free and clear upon paying for the home.
Absolutely. It's your family's largest asset.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, it really is great. Must have a lot of energy, Laura, to keep after this. And it's amazing. And I certainly hope that the pensions, especially in New Jersey State, are not radically affected by
They
this,
are.
that we can't catch up.
Well, they are. And you look at pensions, if people should go to the Department of Labor and look up, there's a list of all the pensions that are endangered. And many New Jersey pension funds are on the list. Carpenters Union and the Electricians Union in 2008.
Well, maybe we
because-
can get some of that information also, and we could put some of that on our website. It'd be great if we could get a little of that information from you, and we could share it.
Sure.
Anybody who wants to go to our website, njteapartycoalition.org, that would be great. I mean, we want to get the information out to people. We want to provide a service to the people who are in New Jersey. So we really, really want that to work out, and we want people to be informed.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate the time that you've come here tonight, and it's been excellent. To our audience, I hope you'll go to our website, NewJerseyTeaPartyCoalition.org, and we're happy that you tuned in. We hope you find it informative. We'll be putting it on our website as well, and so you can tune in there and listen to Laura. Go back over it, hear it again. Sometimes I need to hear it twice.
I know, it's a lot.
And that would be good for all of us. And of course, New Jersey Tea Party Coalition is an organization that's committed to smaller government, less taxes, and more freedom. So I do encourage everybody to go to our website, log on, see what our activity's been, get onto our email blasts, and that will be wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and you have a pleasant good evening. Thank you. Did a great job. Very informative.